Where are we up to?
We're going to start Os Base.
Base?
Yeah.
Base?
Tell me when we're going here.
You're on.
We're on. All right, so we're going to take it back to Os Base here. Basi Lagani, Tafshin Chaf Hey, 1965. The Rebbe's explanation on chapter 15, which we just got up to. And we explained that the Otsar, this that the king is willing to bring out and in a way of bees-boos, in a way of like flaunting and wastefulness, this treasure house that has not only been not used, but no eye has ever seen it, and this quality of victory, this netzach that the king has more than any other person in the kingdom, he's willing to flaunt and bring out this treasure house, right? So he finally explained that what level of godliness is this treasure house that the king, who is God in this mashal, is ready to flaunt and share and give out. So he says it's part of the Or Ein Sof. There's two aspects of the Or Ein Sof. One is lamata mata ad ein tachlis, and one aspect is lamai lamaila ad ein kates. And we finally explained that the quality which is going lamai lamaila is the definition of this treasure house, this otsar, right? And we explained. Let's take it from inside. So he says, chapter 2. He explains in chapter 15. Right, the Frierdiker Rebbe. Hine kashem she'or ein sof hu lamata mata bispashtus v'giloi ad ein shira mispar klal. Just like the Or Ein Sof descends infinitely without any measure, and we explain what that means. That no matter how low the world goes and its limitations, it doesn't stop the Or Ein Sof from being there in its Or Ein Sof way without any limitations, right in the same place of the limitations. That's what it means lamata mata ad ein tachlis. So just like that is a reality of the Or Ein Sof, kamo kain hu Or Ein Sof lamai lamaila ad ein kates, so too the higher end of the Or Ein Sof is bechinas helem ha'or. It's an aspect of concealment of light. Shu kehelem acher helem be'iloi acher iloi. It's one state of concealment after the next, and one state of elevation after the next. But bechinas heder ha'or beheder ha'giloi. In a way of removing the light, removing the revelation. This is called the Or Ein Sof, the aspect of the Or Ein Sof, so to speak, going up. And then, we didn't get to this part yet, but this is the kind of the zinger of this line, the quote from the Rabbi Rayatz, Klalus hu inyan tzimtzum. Right? So this is a very big chiddush when you first read this mimer, because he says, what is this simple way of describing the Or Ein Sof that's lamai lamaila ad ein kates? The tzimtzum. So until now you thought that the tzimtzum was something that was sort of coming as an imposition to stop the light from shining, the Or Ein Sof. As it turns out, the tzimtzum itself is light that's going backwards, right? So the reason why it looks like nothing is not because it's nothing. It's actually like the most brilliant aspect of the Or Ein Sof, but it's going away from you infinitely, and therefore it creates a situation of total darkness. So the tzimtzum itself is the Or Ein Sof that's lamai lamaila ad ein kates. That is kind of a wow moment when you figure that out in your life at some point. Hopefully you just figured it out. Shahaya ba'or Ein Sof baruch hu. This is the tzimtzum that's in the Or Ein Sof. What's that? It's not stopping infinity, basically.
The only thing that could slow down infinity is infinity.
Right, but it's not slowing down or stopping infinity or anything else. It's just a revelation of infinity that's going up, right? And to the untrained eye, this looks like it's stopping infinity, or it looks like it's basically some absence. But it's not really an absence. It's a presentation of a light that's going infinitely away from you. So to any observer at any level, because it's helem acher helem, iloi acher iloi, it looks like an absence, but it's actually the Or Ein Sof.
Negative light. Negative light.
Shuis almus ha'or klalus batzmusu yizbarach. And so again, it's the tzimtzum. What is that? It's the concealment of the light and its inter-inclusion into the essence. So he gives an analogy, which I don't think he gives in this mimer, but it's helpful. It's like there's two different sort of presentations or actions of the Chacham, the great wise man. One is that he's teaching you his infinite wisdom, and in this capacity, even though he could be teaching a child, right? He could encloak inside of this mushal that he's given for the child all the infinite wisdom that he possesses, and that's kind of like an analogy of the Or Ein Sof that's lamata mata, that's going down, because even in the place of this tiny little halacha or mushal, it actually is sitting inside of there the infinite Or Ein Sof light. So that's the ability of the chacham to come down towards you and bring infinity into a finite place. But what is the position of the chacham who's demonstrating the quality of the light that's lamayla ad ein kates? He's basically thinking, right? So he's going deep into his own inner recesses of his thoughts. The student in front of him is just sitting there like seeing nothing, right? He's not getting anything from the chacham. But as far as the chacham is concerned, this brilliance that he needs to like pause and go thinking deep into his own self is much, much higher state of revelation to the chacham than all that infinite wisdom that he's pouring out. So just the fact that it's like going the other way does not mean that it's not light and revelation. It's just the deeper it goes, the more removed it gets from the student. And by the way, this is a handy thing to remember when we see the Beis HaMikdash destroyed and Gullus filling the world and darkness and fires and plagues and all these things. It's like this. It looks like the teacher is ignoring us, and the Rabbi often points out that he's not ignoring us. He's just like deep in thought. And therefore, what's actually happening, this darkness that we see, is really like the highest levels of infinite divine light. To the student, it looks like you're being ignored. But the reality is it's much higher than a state of revelation. Anyway, that's a little bit extra. But he's saying here, end quote, that this is the idea of the inter-inclusion of the light into the essence. So far, so good. The Rebbe says, it goes well if you want to try and wow me with this concept that the Or Ein Sof is lamata ad ein tachlis. In other words, this description of the Or Ein Sof is descriptive and it tells me something interesting. Why? Because since the Or Ein Sof is essentially infinite, as it is before the Tzimtzum. In other words, nothing can stop it, it's unlimited. That's Or Ein Sof. So move on, Godel ha'inyan. Then they can understand the great wow, Shabam shachasu lamata, that it's able to be drawn down below, ad lamata she'en lamata himenu, to such a low that there's nothing lower than it. That I can understand. Like, you're wowing me when you say the Or Ein Sof is lamata mata. Because since essentially the Or Ein Sof is infinite, the fact that it can come into a place which is filled with limitations, right? Right? Because it's essentially the lowly level, right, is called ein tachlis. In other words, infinitely low compared to the Or Ein Sof's status before the tzimtzum. And therefore, when you tell me the Or Ein Sof is able to go lamata mata, it's exciting. You're telling me like, wow, even at a place where there's total concealment, the Or Ein Sof can get there. So that's kind of like a unique and wondrous description. In you're telling me that it can come below, you're telling me a big chiddush, that even though the natural state of it is a pre-tzimtzum expression, it doesn't lose that natural state even after the tzimtzum. So that's like the chiddush of lamata mata ad ein tachlis. It's a very interesting fact about the Or Ein Sof. Aval eino move on. What's not understood, Mawa in the Or Ein Sof shelamayla ad ein kates. What chiddush are you telling me about the Or Ein Sof by saying that it goes lamayla ad ein kates? It goes infinitely high. Hare belav hachi nimtz Or Ein Sof livnei hatzimtzum. Let's try and understand what the Rabbi is saying here. You have to like use your thinking caps a little bit. He's saying anyway, the Or Ein Sof is before the tzimtzum. It's already an infinite light. Mawa inyan hayos l'mayla ad ein kates. What chiddush are you telling me that it goes infinitely high? It's like, I know that already. It's before the tzimtzum and it's infinite light. Seemingly, unlike what we said before, where you're sort of showing me this like radical chiddush that even though the state of Or Ein Sof is pre-tzimtzum, it can maintain its quality even in a place of tzimtzum. But to tell me that it's lamayla ad ein kates, which means it's before the tzimtzum, like duh, yeah, it's lamayla ad ein kates. What description are you giving me that's unique in this case? Yes, it's before the tzimtzum. It's very high. And this is what, because that question would come to you. Didn't it come to you, Shmuel? You were thinking that. Right? So that's why he explains the Rabbi Rayatz in the Maimer, Shulamayla Maila Eidin Kates. What do you mean when you say it's so high? Not simply that it's before the Tzimtzum, but that this highness means it's Bechinas Helam Ha'or. That it means that it can conceal itself. Shu behelam achar helam iloy achar iloy ubechlalos hu inyan tzimtzum. Notice this is the chiddush that what we just realized a moment ago, which is a dramatic and super chiddush, which is that the Orein Sof, which we normally think of as infinite light expanding in every direction, it's actually can be described as something that you can't see and is infinitely concealed, and it's actually the tzimtzum, right? That's a big chiddush. So that's like the punch line when you say that the Orein Sof is Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates. You're telling me that, the Orein Sof is the Tzimtzum? I thought the Tzimtzum was something concealing the Orein Sof. So now you really, no, that's also a description of the Orein Sof, the Tzimtzum itself. Got it? No, well that's okay. You're probably amongst many in this room, including myself. All right, so we'll try and explain it in 1 second. You have a question?
Yeah. So then the Aron Seif could only be Lamaila Adin Kates when it is Lamata Adin Tachlis. Because the only reason you're having a symptom, there is being a symptom, is so that there can be a form of revelation, meaning it can be everywhere. If there was no Lamata Adin Tachlis, then what's the point of a symptom anyway? Just Aron Seif is infinitely everywhere. The fact that you're saying that the R is being
I'm not sure. Hold on a second. One second. Is the Tzimtzum itself, before there's any Kav and worlds, would you call that Lamata Arin Tachlis?
I would call it the prerequisite for Lamata Adin Tachlis.
Fine, but I'm just saying that right there is already a description of the Orein Sof. That's Lamayla Mayla Arin Kates. It doesn't even, there is no Lamata Arin Tachlis in your own definition yet.
But why else?
So you're not just defining the Orein. Fine, don't say why. But the Tzimtzum is a presentation of the Orein Sof that's Lamayla Mayla Arin Kates, right? There's not even a Tachton yet.
If there was no Tzimtzum, could you say that the Aron Seif is the Mayla Adin Kates?
That's like a total contradiction in terms. The Tzimtzum is the Orein Sof that's Lamayla Mayla Arin Kates.
But it's Mayla Adin Kates because it's being removed from.
What do you think? But you're calling removed. I'm calling shining the other way. It's not nothing's removed.
So
it's shining. It's just shining like infinite light speed the other direction. It's going up.
So so that's the Chiddush.
The Chiddush is that what you thought the Tzimtzum was is not what the Tzimtzum is. It's Or Ein Sof Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates.
So the Chiddush is that even when it's Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates, it could still be Lamata Mata.
No, you're coming with this. That's your Chiddush. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying like this. Let me just explain, because this is back to Shmuel's point. Let's just keep it simple, right? The point is, you're going to now describe to me the Or Ein Sof, Zohar, and you're going to tell me that it's Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis, Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates. What are you bringing me? What information are you telling me that I didn't already know? It's called Or Ein Sof. It's infinite. What did you add by saying it's low and high, right? So the Rebbe is pointing out here, if you were to tell me it's low, I get the Chiddush. Shmuel, you listening? Right? I get the Chiddush, because in a place which is low and confined and constricted to vessels and so forth, you might think, erroneously, that the Orein Sof has no business being there, because it's a finite space. Orein Sof is infinite. Those two things cannot reside in the same place. When you tell me the Orein Sof is also there, I'm like, wow. Orein Sof, Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis. Very, very interesting. That's a Chiddush, right? You have to pay attention, right? So first, that's a Chiddush. Now, what's the Chiddush in telling me the Orein Sof is Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates? Seemingly, before we get to our explanation, it's not really such a big Chiddush. In other words, that's what I thought the Orein Sof was. Something which is before the Tzimtzum, and goes infinitely high, and has no relevance to being contracted, right? So it's just high light. When you told me it's low light, remember, you told me a Chiddush, that in a place of constriction, it can still be infinite. Chiddush, got it. What's the Chiddush by telling me that before the Tzimtzum, there's infinite light? Because here you're not trying to tell me what happens in the place of concealment, that it can be there. So what's the Chiddush, right? I would think that, of course, before the Tzimtzum, and the place of the Orein Sof is going infinitely high. So he's coming to tell you, that's not, the point is, what does it mean infinitely high? Infinitely concealed, i.e. the Tzimtzum. That's a huge Chiddush. Now you're telling me, what is the Or Ein Sof? It goes infinitely high. It means that the Or Ein Sof is also what we have been calling all of our lives and not realizing it, the absence of the light. We thought the absence of the light was something other than light. It was like an impediment of some force that's not the Or Ein Sof coming to the picture and stopping the Or Ein Sof from being there. That's what we all thought the Tzimtzum was, I think, right? Some other act of God. It turns out it's not another act of God. It's part of the Or Ein Sof itself. It's just like that Chacham who's busy thinking, and compared to the student, he's getting nothing because all the action's happening inside the brain of the rabbi, and he's gone fishing deep into the infinite recesses of the essence of himself. And therefore, it's called Tzimtzum. So the Or Ein Sof, Lamai Adin Kates, is a huge Chiddush. Thank you for that description. I would never have known. It means until no end.
So then could you say that the Maila Adin Kates and the Mata Adin Tachlis are actually the same thing?
If you want.
It makes sense to say that.
I mean, I think that you have to say they're the same thing. We're not saying there's two Or Ein Sofs.
Or you could say there's two directions.
There's two directions, but since it's one Or Ein Sof, obviously those two directions are happening at the same time. So to your point, which now I think I'm more happy to make it before now we clarified the point he's making here, is that yes, they're happening at the same time. The reason why there's an experience of Yesh, which is the Tachton, whether it be the Tzimtzum, whether it be the Kav in the bottom and Asiya, is because there's a presence of the Or Ein Sof, that's Lamai Adin Kates, making total concealment of God, and therefore in its wake making a feeling of the absence of God. Yesh. And simultaneously, the Or Ein Sof is Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis, which means right in that place where you think there's Yesh, there's the other side of the Or Ein Sof, which is infinite light filling that place as nothing's happened. So yeah, they're not two things. They're two totally opposite things that are happening at the same time everywhere.
So there's both infinite light exiting that space and going higher, and also infinite light filling that space and going lower.
I say again, when you say exiting the space, I kind of taking.
Like histalkus, like
Yeah, but histalkus, what do we say in Basi Lagani? You used the perfect word to walk into this one. Kadiskafia histalik yukucha. What does the word histalik there mean? Reveals. Right? So it's the histalkus is not a removal of something, it's a revelation of something you can't see. It's a revelation of something you can't see, which is actually higher than the thing you can see. So it's nothing's being removed. There's just a presentation of a light which is so high that you can't see it. Which is also the Indian about the histalkus of a tzaddik. No one went anywhere. Vayechi.
Well, that's how you realize. You realize that the Or Ein Sof is the Maila Adin Kates when you realize that it's the Mata Adin Tachlis. When you realize that this is actually not only is it
All right, let's go on.
hidden.
You're making some connections there.
Of that which isn't there.
Yeah, I'm not on the train, but we're trying to get on the train. Okay. After this quote, where did we get up to? Where did we get up to? Okay. Yeah, the end of that paragraph. Okay, next paragraph, final paragraph on the page. Va'inyan bazeh. Here it gets very interesting. K'bavur b'Torah Baal Shem Tov. So the Rabbi brings a Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, which is printed in Keser Shem Tov. He tells you where, here at the bottom in that footnote. And he says, Perush HaKasuv, the Baal Shem Tov comes there to explain the meaning of a verse we all know well. Breishis bar Elokim es. Hashamayim es haaretz, right? But he sort of stops at es, ace. Right? And he says, what does it mean, Breishis bar Elokim ace? Breishis, famously, Targum Yonasan is b'chokhmah. So there's different explanations in Aramaic of what Bereshis means. Targum Yonasan explains that it means b'chokhmah. Okay? So, fine. Shu os aleph. Now, what is chokhmah? Chokhmah we're going to call the letter aleph. Where did you get in your mind to call chokhmah an aleph? No problem. I'll bring you a verse where it says, aleph cha chokhmah, aleph cha bina. Right? This is a verse he quotes here from Eov. I happen to thought it was somewhere else. Excuse me. But he says over here, what does aleph cha chokhmah mean?
Why is aleph with two olives?
Because it's a the word aleph is the word, and then a'alefcha is like I will. It's a prefix. Right, so yeah, what does it mean?
I taught you how.
Right, or I will teach you. I'll teach you chokhmah. So what do you see? That the word aleph is associated with chokhmah. That's where the word ulpan comes from, and basically it means to learn. So aleph is chokhmah. Now what happens? Nis'atev bo besoch os aleph. So Hashem wraps himself inside of this aleph, right? Ubara or min os aleph vu or atzilus. And then he creates light from the letter aleph, and this is called the light of atzilus. So Bereshis basically means, right, chokhmah, right? And chokhmah is all of a sudden bara, it's creating things. What's it creating? It's creating the world of atzilus. As soon as this chokhmah, or God, wraps himself into this letter aleph, which is chokhmah, it creates the world of atzilus. And that shouldn't be totally crazy for us, because we know, in general, the whole world of atzilus is called the world of chokhmah. Where do we see that the world of atzilus is associated with chokhmah? Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei is the four worlds, and it's also the spheros. Yud refers to chokhmah there, and the whole world of atzilus therefore is like a world of made out of chokhmah. So that's what he's saying here. Hashem wraps himself into an aleph, which is chokhmah, aleph chokhmah, and he creates the world of atzilus. What does he do then? Achar kach nis'atev im os aleph besoch os beis ubara olam abriya. Now he puts that aleph of chokhmah, he cloaks that into another letter called beis, and that creates the world of bria. So in other words, it's kind of like there's like a shield or a filter, right? The aleph itself was the type of filter, because if he didn't go into aleph, there would be no world, there would just be infinite light. When he cloaks himself to aleph, he makes a world, but it's a very high level world. He then takes the whole world of atzilus, cloaks that into a base, and out comes bria. And then he put the now aleph, which is in a base, he puts that whole operation inside of a gimel, and bara olamos lamata me'olam abriya. And he doesn't give us all the specifics, but he creates the worlds that are below bria. Ad shnis atev ba'os taf. Until each one, like a little Russian dolls, gets put inside of layer after filter after layer after filter after layer, and each one starts to come out with a different dimension, and he finally gets to taf. Ubara olamos tachtonim, and that represents the lower worlds. Right? V'zeh shekasu, Bereshis bar Elokim Ace. Right? Where did you get this aleph taf? Because it says Bereshis in the beginning. Hashem created aleph to taf, Ace. Shuchav beis osios min aleph ad taf, which is the 22 letters from aleph to taf.
Is that another reason the world was created with the term starts at the base, because until it came out of its seedless, like that's becoming physical. I know it's also like has to do with like tohu and tikkun or whatever.
Yeah. In fact, we spoke about it in one of the Maimorim from the Alter Rebbe, that because there's 600,000 Jews in the Torah, right? So it says the whole Torah is speaking to the world of Bria. Because remember we said there was 288 sparks, and they fell, and then they became 600,000 in the world of Bria. In the world of Atzilus, there was 288. And that's why the first sefer of the Torah is the Avos. It's like sort of before you get to the main story of the Jews, right? But it's sort of like that's like sort of the introduction, the Torah as it is in Atzilus. And then when it gets into basically Parsha Shmos, it goes into a Torah of Bria. And then there's this idea that, yes, the Torah starts with the base because it speaks to the world of Bria, but then there's an Aleph in Anochi Hashem Elokecha, where Hashem actually comes down and gives the Torah. So that's the Torah of the Aleph. There's a lot of, you're tapped into something that's very deep over there. Anyway, Ubesocho Ruchniuso Yizbarach Shenikra Shamayim. So now he starts to explain the rest of the verse. So, Bereshis bar Elokim Eis HaShamayim, right? Which means that in this Eis is the spirituality inside of all those worlds, and that's why it says Eis HaShamayim, that's like the spirituality that's underlying all these things. In other words, that the Shamayim is that he put the spirituality and cloaked himself into all these 22 letters, and then with that Shamayim, Baras HaAretz, he created the Aretz. Shehu kol inyani chumnei haaretz. So basically, which is all the matters of the materialism of the earth, Shu'aydei Dalid Me'os Levushin Min Aleph V'ad Taf, which is essentially what we're going to call here the 400 garments from Aleph till Taf. Right? What are these 400 garments? What's he talking about 400 garments? Where did you get that from? Yeah. Right. Right. In other words, if you go to all the letters, you get to Gematria 400. Right? So this 400, it comes up in a lot of places. Right? This 400, first of all, what is the 400? It's like the Kalim, right? He's saying the Shamayim is sort of the spirituality, the godliness which is in all these worlds. And the Aleph until Taf, which is these 400 levels of garments, they're sort of the Chumrius and the Kalim, the Yeshus of every world. And the Yeshus gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, not just till 22 letters, but if you actually do the Gematria, it actually gets to 400 levels. And we see these 400 levels coming up in the Torah. There's a lot of interesting discussion about these 400 levels, which this actually fills in some interesting points from other Maimarim where we see. Where do we see this like number 400? We saw it in Torah, or I don't know if we did it this year together, but 400, what's the idea of 400? Where do we see this? Yeah? The men of Esav, right? And in the men of Esav, which is like the thick klippas, where this is coming from, it says that these men of Esav actually, where did they come from? Remember that one? But before you get to Tohu, where do you see 400 in the Torah before they get to Esav? Exactly. Ar b'mos shekel kesef over l'socher, right? So 400 shekels that Avram gave to the klippas, over l'socher means like they crossed over. Socher can mean circular, it means keser. It's basically he gave over some highlights into the negative hands. These 400 levels, they then manifest later down the road as like these 400 evil men of Esav. And it says there's something called the 400 bati dinim lamaila. It's like hell, basically, is described as 400 houses of judgment, very strict houses of judgment, which is essentially, it all comes down to this. This is like the levels of concealment, and now we see where it all comes from, of the spiritual light being encloaked into these levels. And in the end of days, there's a big, Rashi even mentions it, that there's also this idea of the 400 men of David HaMelech, that he was able to bring into him and sort of carve them in the desert. They became his like major men. That's the idea of David Malka Mashiach. The whole point is in the end we're going to refine all those levels of Yeshus, and that's going to be the Mashiach. So it all comes from this state, this way Hashem created the world. But these 22 letters, it's really 400 levels of Kli after Kli after Kli of concealment.
Do we ever combine them all?
Don't cross the streams. Okay, we're going to hold here.